available if you'd like to review them or watch them or mash them up into a dance single and do a TikTok dance to it. And Great Decisions books, originally $35, are $10. $10 for you today on the last day of the series. So if you want to get one, we've got a few left at the back. I want to remind you that Great Decisions is made possible in part with the generous support of Leslie Brunker in her mother's honor, with additional support from longtime members David Margulies and Bill and Tina Brown. Thank you. Without you, we wouldn't be here. So we are grateful to all of you for whether you're signing up for one program or, leaving us the farm in your, in the next life. Portland State University is located in the heart of downtown Portland, Oregon, in Multnomah County. We honor the indigenous people whose traditional and ancestral homelands we stand on, the Multnomah, the Cathalet, the Clackamas, Tumwater, Watlala bands of the Chinook, the Tualatin Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River. It is important to acknowledge the ancestors of this place and to recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. And in remembering these communities, we honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants. And finally, we are also here with the wonderful partnership of the Portland State University's Office of Global Engagement and Innovation, Gesundheit, and to today's speaker. So this will be very much like we've done in the past, although we will have, it's sort of like the hologram in Star Wars. We will have the Consul General here on the screen. We will be doing Q&A like we normally do, walking around with the mic. Very important that we're on the mic, no shouting. So Derek and myself will be doing that during the Q&A section, but I want to take a moment and introduce our speaker. Very, very excited that Prakash Gupta, who is the Consul General of India, is able to be with us today. They opened up a consulate in Seattle this last year, and I was very fortunate enough to meet the Consul General and his staff 4 or 5 months ago and brought this up and mentioned the wonderful opportunity to speak to a very, very engaged population just south of the border. So Prakash Gupta is a career diplomat from the Indian Foreign Service who has served in various capacities in Beijing, Shanghai, the India mission to the United Nations in New York and in Jakarta. His most recent assignment in New Delhi included his stewardship of India's tenure at the UN Security Council from 2021 to 22. And if you remember this, he was pivotal in piloting the International Day of Yoga resolution at the UN. He was also part of the planning preparations for India's hosting of the successful G20 summit in New Delhi, and he is now leading India's first consulate in Seattle as the Consul General of India in Seattle. So let's give the Consul General a big hand.
Full time. Shipment.
Are you hearing us?
I am. Would you like me to begin?
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Am I audible at your end, please?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for this introduction. Let me first begin by congratulating the WorldOregon for your 75th anniversary. I would have really liked to be in person there, speaking to you face to face. So I'll tell you the reason why I am not being able to be there in person. I was there till late night yesterday in Portland, and I had to come back because today is a very big festival of colors in India called Holi. And there was an early morning celebration of the Indian American community of the Festival of Colors in Seattle, early morning, 8 o'clock. For which I had to be there. It was a very large gathering, and that's what made me come back. But I had a very good set of engagements in Portland yesterday. I wish everyone there a very happy, colorful festival of Holi to the Indian American community in Oregon. And what I intend to do today is maybe speak for 10 to 15 minutes on a few set of 4 or 5 key issues that I think should interest the audience. These would broadly cover A, why did we open a consulate in Seattle? What do we hope to do by opening a consulate here? 2, on what is India's place in the world? How does the India story look up in the present geopolitical space? A little bit on India-US relations. Where is it headed to? And what are the things we are planning to do in Oregon? So these would be the 4 or 5 ideas I would like to touch on. And then I would be happy to take questions and answers, and I'll be happy to give my suggestions on them. If that is broadly okay, can I begin my intervention now?
Yeah, me too.
Excellent. So on the first piece, why did we open a consulate in Seattle? Look, we are the 6th Indian consulate in the United States. Our earlier consulates used to be in New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Atlanta, and Houston. We came to the Pacific Northwest, I would say, for 2 key reasons. One is, in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a conscious decision between the Indian and American leaderships, and this is a bipartisan decision, and not related to Biden or Trump administration, that technology is going to be the centerpiece of India-US ties in a roadmap of 10 to 15 years going forward. And some of the things that are happening in the critical and emerging technologies landscape, for example, things in the artificial intelligence space, things in quantum computing, aerospace, and agri-tech, things that are of critical importance to our peoples in India and United States, happen to be centered around the greater Seattle area in companies like Microsoft, Boeing, Amazon, and the others. And to provide a seamless bridge on the tech side was one of the key factors that we decided to establish our presence in Seattle and engage with the Pacific Northwest. The second reason is a more obvious reason, is why all embassies and consulates open shop wherever they go, is to address the needs of their respective nationals and communities. So we have a very vibrant Indian American community in Washington as well as in Oregon. I believe between the 2 states alone, we are close to 300,000 Indian Americans. And in the 9 states that we cover from Seattle, which we call the Pacific Northwest region, we cover Washington, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Alaska, Nebraska, Wyoming, and both the Dakotas. In all of these 9 states put together, we have close to about 400,000 Indian Americans by rough estimates. So there's a huge load of consular, passport, visa, OCI, travel-related work that we are here to address. So those would be the 2 key pillars that we are trying to do. In the last 1 year that we have been here, we have attempted to reach out to each of the 9 states, including to Oregon. I have had good engagements in Portland. Yesterday, I was at the Oregon State University, where we worked out a plan of cooperation in the higher education space, what we can do at a faculty to faculty level, student to student level. Can we do joint research projects? Some things that I touch on the last part of my remarks on what do we plan to do in Portland. Well, having said that, the second piece of what I wanted to speak to you about was the India story and how is India looking up at this point of time. For those of you who may not be completely aware of India, India is about 28 states and 8 union territories. At this point of the time, we are the world's largest population, 1.4 billion people. The plus part, which perhaps no other country in the world enjoys in this demographic dividend that we share, is out of this 1.4 billion people, 65%, which is about 900 odd million people, is in the age group of 18 to 35. This is a young population, English speaking, IT skilled, well educated, and raring to contribute to their energies to the growth of the nation. So there is a very positive youth dividend that we enjoy at this point of time. And I would focus on just 3 aspects of the India story. One is the democracy, the value that we share with the United States, democracy. The second, I would say, is the digital revolution that is presently in play in India. And the third, I would like to focus a little bit also is on the economy, how is the Indian economy shaping up. So that said, when you talk about democracy, we know that the United States is the world's oldest democracy, India, the world's largest, and we claim to be the world's largest because of the size of the Indian elections. We recently did our elections in 2024, around May, June, which was the largest electoral exercise in the world. For people who would like to get a scale of the Indian election size, our eligible voter population was 998 million, out of which close to 690 million turned up to vote. That's the largest for any country anywhere in the world. Just to get you a sense of the number of political parties and the size of our elections, we are not just 2, 3, 4, or 10 electoral parties. When Indian elections take place between the center and the states all together, we have close to 2,500 political parties. So that's the size of the candidates on the fray that we are talking about. We do it through something called electronic voting machines all over the country. We deploy close to 5.5 million electronic voting machines with 1 million polling stations. And some of the stats that came across from the Indian elections of 2024, I would like to share it with you of how we went about this democratic exercise. We are perhaps the only country that provides a button on our electronic voting machine called NOTA. It stands for none of the above. So it does give the option to the Indian electorate that if they are really upset with all the choices on the table, they can reject all the candidates or both the candidates who are fighting. And in this last election, I have a very interesting story from one city in India, the central city in India called Indore, where out of the two candidates on table, the people were so upset that a staggering number of 184,000 people, 184,000 people queued up to press the Nota button. And in one of the sub-localities, it was Nota button, which was the winner, and both candidates were rejected. So people had to throw up other candidates. And again, I'm telling this to let you know the sheer scope and breadth and beauty of the Indian democracy, where it's conducted so transparently that performance really matters for a person to win the Indian election. Two other stats, which are also very interesting from the Indian recently concluded election story, is we had close to 8.2 million people, 8.2 million people with disabilities who turned up to vote this time. And out of them, another good number is we had 220,000 plus people who are above the age of 100 years who turned up to cast their vote. And when I say turned up, for people with disabilities and for elderly, it is the state's responsibility to make sure that they are brought to the polling station and then sent back. So both people with disabilities and this elderly number of people above 100 years of age, 220,000, who were assisted by the state to make sure they're able to cast their vote. So a vote is a very important thing in India, and you can get a sense of the age that turns up to cast their vote, which really matters. The second part, if I were to shift slightly away from the democracy part of how we go about our elections to what I call the Indian economy part at this point of time, we are presently the world's fifth largest economy. We clocked 8.4% GDP growth rate in the last quarter of 2024. In this year, our forecast, as per the IMF, is about 6.4% or 6.8%, something close to that. Again, the world's highest. We are the world's fastest growing economy. The only country after us is about Indonesia, which is at a 5.4%, still a difference of more than a percentage in terms of economic growth. Given the young population size, it's expected to be the world's largest market by some size in the next 2 to 3 time 4-year frame. And we hope to be the world's third largest economy by 2028. That's what we are looking at. In terms of our present, what I call is the digital story space of it. And it's a very fascinating story in India. We used to be a highly cash-based economy, and cash used to be the primary mode of payments till about 2012, 13, and 14. But post 2014, we really scaled up our payment platform. It's called Aadhaar, linked to a biometric ID using uniform payment interface. And I'm happy to inform you that out of our 1.4 billion people, we have now 95%, close to 95%, which is 1.2 billion plus people who hold this Aadhaar card, which is a biometric ID card that helps connect your bank account on your phone to make a unique payment. And as of date, half of the world's digital transactions in a day, nearly 46% in a day of global digital transactions, take place in India only. And to simplify things, I'd just like to tell you that if you were to take the number of digital transactions happening globally the world over, if you were to add all the digital transactions happening in Brazil, China, Thailand, and South Korea, add them up, India still is way more than all of them put together in a day. And we've been able to achieve that transformation purely because of this unified payments interface that was implemented and scaled up in the last decade or so. And it's such a beautiful story because there used to be this perception earlier in the 70s and 80s in India that whenever you used to try and help the farmers or send government subsidies, out of every $1 that the government at the center was spending, only 10 cents or 20 cents was reaching to the eventual beneficiary. But now when you have had bank accounts created for everyone, linked through Aadhaar to the phone app, whatever incentive the government wants to reach the needy, it reaches verbatim, instant, same day, same button. And that was also very instrumental in our experience of how we tackled COVID, in how we went about vaccinating 1.2 billion people in a course of 3 months, how digital IDs were created, how digital certificates were created, and how the world's largest vaccination program was conducted in India at that point of time. And it was such a successful story just from our digital experience that now nearly 16 countries of the global south are trying to implement India's digital, what we call as DPI, digital public infrastructure, in other southern settings because it's so cost competitive, so scalable, and so much of direct good, so much of direct benefit in improving the lives of the common people. Another important facet, I would say, on the digital dimension of the India story as it's evolving presently is how we are doing on startups, AI, and the whole data center space. Well, as per present studies, close to 50% of the world's data, is going to be generated in the Indian market alone. And data, as you know, is the backbone of the AI industry. We have close to 2,000 startups coming up through in India in the last couple of years. About 200 plus of those 2,000 in the last 2 years alone have been unicorns, turnover of more than $1 billion. And I'm also happy to inform you that in the last month of February of 2025, Indian startups attracted close to $1.65 billion of investments from across the world, given the potential that they offered to achieve in the digital space alone. In the last couple of years, India has been home to 1,900 global capability centers, GCCs as they call them, of one of the world's leading multinational companies. So even from the greater Seattle and even the Oregon space, I'm happy to inform you that companies like Microsoft, Boeing, or even Nike is looking at having a data center operation in India, given the skill set, the quality of the talent pool, and the way we are doing on IT at this point of time. It is also estimated that 25% of the incremental workforce across the world, 25% of the world's skilled workforce across the world is going to come in the next 10 years from India alone. And presently, the startup ecosystem is the third largest in the world. So that's roughly my piece on how the India story is looking like. When we add this all up together in the context of global geopolitics and India's place in the world, where we find ourselves presently in South Asia is a very difficult geography, to be honest. What is happening to our west, south, and east is a slightly conflict-ridden zone. But India has done well for itself when it comes to its neighborhood policy. We've always placed neighborhood first as our key cornerstone of our foreign policy while engaging with all the key players in the world. We recently had a very successful visit of Prime Minister Modi. Even he was one of the first visitors to the President Trump administration. And India has been uniquely placed to have had bipartisan support from US government coming over the last several decades. I'm also happy to inform you that when it comes to our climate policy, India is the only G20 country to have achieved its Paris climate commitments in 2023 itself, which is 7 years ahead of the 2030 target. And while we became the world's fastest growing economy, we also grew our solar capacity, which is the solar panels and renewable energy capacity, by 2,300%. Yes, 2,300% was the rate of growth of the solar industry in India, which is again one of the most stunning feats of statistics to have come out on the renewable energy space in India. Within the context of the global South, India is a very key player in the group of the 77. India has had leading role in the multilateral space when it comes to voicing the concerns of the global South. We hosted a summit of the global South a couple of years back. We are part of several key groupings, whether it's the BRICS, the non-aligned movement, or vis-a-vis the US. We also are part of a group called the Quad, which is doing a lot of good work in the multilateral and in the context of the global South as well. So when we look at India-US working together, as an outcome of recent visit of the Prime Minister, we announced an initiative called Compact. What it stands for is basically an acronym of a word catalyzing opportunities for military partnership, accelerated commerce, and technology. So when you look at Compact, I would say defense, technology, cyber, and trade are going to be very key areas in the next few years going forward. And between our two countries, I would say we have developed such good interdependencies where we are working together for mutual benefit. For example, when defense and aerospace in India grow, industries in the states of Washington, Arizona, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, and Pennsylvania tend to thrive. Similarly, you know that Indians fly a lot, and when Indians fly more, we have a large portion of the commercial planes order presently placed on Boeing, which is nearly sending a plane, a small-bodied plane, a week to India at this point of time, to Indian carriers as well. Similarly, India in the last few years has started manufacturing Apple phones in India, which cater to most of South Asia's requirements, which is again a very big plus in the Apple phone industry. Just last year, I think around 2023 June, even in the semiconductor space, we had Micron making an investment for assembling chips in India, in Gujarat, which is a facility up and running. Intel, as you are aware, has its operations in India. There has been considerable collaboration between Intel's India unit as well as what finds itself in Portland. And we are also working together to see that we are trying to make the best use of our complementaries and synergies in the space, in science, in startups and sustainability, in farming, finance, as well as energy and education. So that's broadly the breadth and scope of the India-US cooperation. When it comes to our priorities vis-a-vis Oregon, I would say, based on my discussions yesterday, including with City Council as well as the community and the university leadership, we are hoping to host and welcome a delegation from the Oregon State University in the last quarter of this year for a faculty exchange program. We are hoping to bring an immersive experience on India at the Oregon State University in the form of an India Culture Week, a week-long celebration of Indian arts, Indian films, Indian food, Indian cultural dance performances, lectums on Indian heritage arts at university campuses. So that's an experience we are hoping to bring towards the end of the year in Oregon. We aim to do one of the largest celebrations of the International Day of Yoga this 21st June in Portland. The Indian American community is all excited. We'll get students, community, and invite all our American friends to join in the celebrations. 21st June was chosen because it's the stay of the summer solstice, the world's the longest day in the year. And we hope to this time do it in all the 9 states that we cover in the capital cities, including in the prominent cities where the community is looking at yoga. And again, yoga is something that India gave to the world. It came not just as a, what should I say, as an exercise. It's an agenda item on the field of global health in the UN's agenda, where it helps you connect with yourself in a better way. So those of you who are interested in yoga, please do join us on the International Day of Yoga. We're also looking at celebrating the India Day in Portland later this year, around the 4th or 3rd week of August, which is an annual celebration done by the ICA, the Indian Cultural Association of the Indian Americans who live in the greater Portland area. So that's some of the initiatives we are planning to do in Portland. And with the Indian consulate here now firmly in place in Seattle, we look forward to deepening our collaboration with the state of Oregon and working together for cementing better trade, tech, and people-to-people exchanges. So that's largely my piece. Sorry for my long monologue, but I am more interested in hearing from you and fielding your questions. Thank you, Tim, for setting this up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Consul General. I'm going to hand the first question over to our member, Leslie Brunker, who has a question for you.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I have visited India twice, second time as recently as last year, and I'm curious about the financial situation. So a cash society makes it difficult to tax people, but now you're saying people are involved in this digital system. So has the tax system changed with that digital system?
Thank you so much for this question. Very good and interesting question. Look, because of India in the 70s and 80s being a very cash-driven economy, this was a major challenge that our finance ministry used to face, how to bring everybody under the tax net, how to widen the bracket of the taxation system and make it as transparent, seamless as possible. So there were 2 things that helped us resolve this problem. One, as I told you, is creating bank accounts for everyone and making sure that payments were done through the digital platform where you have a trace, track, and record. At this point of time, as I told you, we have close to 98% of Indian population banked and on this UPI platform. So this is a very unique experience where the world's largest populated country went from a phase of being mostly unbanked to a banked phase without going through credit cards and debit cards in most of the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. We now, if you go to a fruit seller, we make payments using our phone. We just scan that, even if you buy an apple in a village. And that's what he prefers. He would not accept cash or he would not accept any other form of payment. Now, when it comes to taxation, the biggest challenge we used to face earlier, which is a decade back, is our different states had their own taxation system. And there was no unified taxation rates for a particular product across the length and breadth of India. So we brought in an act called the GST Act, which is the General Goods and Services Act. This is also one of the pioneering attempts of the Prime Minister Modi's government, which implemented it and scaled it up across the length and breadth of India. So all states of India have now uniform taxation. So you have now every transaction, nearly every transaction, being digitally accounted for and a uniform taxation rate that has overcome the glitches that the corporate sector used to face earlier. So I'm very happy to inform you, Leslie, that at this point of time, we are doing very well on the financial sector space using fintech and digital payments platform, where tax revenues have increased manyfold, both for state governments as for central governments. But the pioneering thing I would say is a combination of the GST Act and the digital payments that we have shifted to. Any other questions?
Thank you for your presentation. You have celebrated the what you might have called the digital revolution and the interest and the growth of AI in India. And yet in the expert presentation that we read in the Foreign Policy Association booklet, it mentions that with increased automation, it's increasing the level of unemployment, particularly between the kids between 20 and 24. I think it stated that the unemployment rate was 45%. I wondered if you'd comment on that.
There are two parts to your question. One is the issue of unemployment, and second is how is digitization and AI going to impact employment of skilled people. First, let me address the latter part. This is an ongoing debate that the increased prevalence of AI is going to kind of lay off more people from people who are working in the AI ecosystem. Without getting into how it would impact India, the larger point I would say is when I made the case for India's unique demography, 65% being in that 18 to 35 bracket, there are considerable opportunities at this point of time in the non-traditional sectors in employment in India. For example, the multimedia industry is booming. The gaming industry is booming. When you come to the entertainment or the travel industry or the hospitality space, India is one of the world's largest outbound tourism markets. Now, why I'm mentioning these new fields is traditionally India used to be a very farming intense country. 50 to 60% of our workforce used to be in the farming sector. But with the way the economic growth is now panning towards the services sector, the employment skill set and the nature of avenues have opened up. So I don't see unemployment being a major challenge. It was a challenge. It is still a very important election issue in India when parties contest for elections. But I would say it is being addressed in the course of the avenues that are now being opened up to young Indian people in this wide, largest market of the world that we say. Second part of the question on will AI impact and cause layoffs in India going forward? Look, this is a global issue. I would say all IT companies are looking at how do we redeploy, reskill people where certain aspects of what used to be essentially human jobs are becoming redundant now. Work from home, when it got introduced in a COVID era, created new avenues. People found alternative options. But I would say where India is placed at this point of time, we have surplus of skill, enough to take care of our own need as well as to be deployed outside. Because as I said in my presentation, 25% of the global workforce in the next 10 years is going to come from India alone, irrespective of AI panning out the way it is supposed to. So I'd like to leave it there. Thank you.
So a question for you about student exchange. We have so often had really wonderful and talented young people coming from India and other South Asian countries and coming here for school. As we're looking at more rigorous and significant challenges to immigration and to student programs, are you worried about what that means for the relationship between educational institutions here in the US and in India?
Again, thank you, Tim. A very good question. Look, there is a sizable number of Indian students who come to the United States and US universities for higher education, undergrad, postgrad programs. Is the present immigration and visa system going to impact their opportunities for higher education? At this point of time, I don't have evidence of numbers going down now. I may have, say, a year down the line to relate it better. But yes, from the number of students I have interacted with across US universities, like yesterday at Oregon State University or other universities in UW or Seattle universities, getting visas in time, particularly US visas for students who have been guaranteed admission in US universities, is a challenge. For example, I recall my visit to Montana, where Montana State universities were very upfront. They said, look, we recruited 50 students, but only 5 of them's visas came clear, and the remaining 45 had to struggle and were nearly on the verge of losing a year. So visas is an issue. But when it comes to student exchange, I don't see that an issue because these are short-term visa requirements. We do help, like we are getting a group of students from Montana to visit India for about 2 to 3 weeks in the month of July, and these are short exchange programs. There I don't see a problem. So getting a good sense of Indian culture, food, habits, and what the country represents can be done easily through short-term student exchange programs, which faculty, universities to universities can help contribute to. The challenge, as you rightly said, is towards large number of foreign students coming to US universities and being uncertain about visa coming through or not through. But that said, it is also a structural issue which we take between Indian and US governments through what we call is an annual consular dialogue that we have through our embassy in DC, the USCIS, the US State Department, and the Indian Ministry of Home Affairs, where we are trying to see how can we simplify and make it more predictable. But this is, again, as I said, mostly a concern the US side has to address, and I hope sooner or later it would be finding its right balance going forward.
Thank you so much. In February, just a month ago, the India-US joint statement was reached, which was a very powerful statement between our two countries. I'm curious if, because things have been moving very quickly in our own country, what the impression is, and is there worry about trade wars or trade and tariffs, or even pieces of the US-India joint statement going forward?
So as far as I recall, I saw the joint statement as a very positive affirmation of continuity in the strength, character, and diversity of the India-US relationship. It spelled out tangible areas for cooperation, including that compact element that I referred to you, and concrete steps that it looks at going forward. Under the new administration, there will be obviously stated concerns on tariff, how that impacts our bilateral trade. But I believe there is an ongoing dialogue between our respective ministries of trade. The Indian Minister of Commerce was in Washington, D.C. recently, and we are trying to look at arrangements where we could address this in a manner where both sides' concerns are addressed. And I don't, at this point of time, feel alarmed that we are distracted from the larger objective of finding a common minimum ground where we can address both sides' concerns. And I am hopeful and optimistic, cautiously optimistic, that we may have some positive news to share even on the trade piece with this administration very soon.
I have a question on, thank you for your presentation. What is the Indian stance on the Ukraine situation? And another question, in the Jammu Kashmir problem, is there any hope of a permanent solution to that? Thank you.
Thank you for both your questions. The first one, the Ukraine piece, I would say ever since the commencement of the conflict in Ukraine, India's position has been consistent, clear, and I would even say has stood the test of time. We are the only country who from day one have said that, in fact, our Prime Minister told us to President Putin, sitting next across him, that this is not an age of war. If these issues have to be addressed, they have to be addressed through dialogue and diplomacy. They have been our key fulcrum of advice to both the countries, both to Ukraine as well as to Russia, that if you have a problem, you need to sit across the table, talk, and address it through dialogue and diplomacy. We do not believe that this is an age of war, which will help us find a space going forward. We've also consistently said that, look, in this day and age, territorial integrity and sovereignty of countries must be respected. We've been unambiguous in our statement. But sometimes there is this kind of perception, given India's unique relationship and historical relationship with Russia, that we are on A side or B side. Look, India is standing on its own side. We are not on A or B side. We are on the side of peace and hope that peace will be achieved at the earliest. That's what we've been telling both sides, who are primary conflicts in this equation. And we are ready to play our due role in trying to get to an early solution. On the second question of Jammu and Kashmir, at this point of time, I would say we have recently had very good elections in Jammu and Kashmir. There is an elected government out there, which is functioning, well in place, recognized by the residents of the state. The only piece of the unsolved equation is what our foreign minister, and I'd like to quote him here, is he was very clear that there is a certain portion of an outstanding territory still in the illegal occupation of Pakistan, and that needs to be returned to India. And that's when we hope that permanent peace would be achieved when the entire territory is resolved. So that's how we look at the problem going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question about call center sector of the economy, the economic economy. How strong is it? I have a personal interest because I was a soft skills trainer at the Jawaharlal Nehru Training Center in AP. Is that still up and running? Do you know?
A good question. Look, there used to be, I would say 20 years ago, when call center was used to be mushrooming all over in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And a lot of young people used to get early out of school into call centers for quick economic packages and get invested in them. Now, with the way the data center industry has evolved, how computing has evolved, most of these can be done through AI-based chatbots who can answer these queries and have made, in a sense, human requirement of addressing a query redundant to a large extent. So if you were to ask me now, I would say the call center industry landscape in India is shrinking, has shrunk largely, is in basically post-sales customer service support wherever human interface is necessary. So if you were to say, how is that going? I would say at one point of time, 10, 20 years back, it was a very big portion of our economy, but not that big at this point of time. With regards to the Jawaharlal Nehru Center in AP, yes, that is still there. It's a very prominent center. I don't know, and from your excitement, I can say that you should visit it again whenever you want to, and we can set that up for you. But the Jawaharlal Nehru University and its studies and centers are all over India and doing very well for themselves. Thank you.
Great. So, Consul General, I've got a couple questions from our audience online that I'd like to read. First of all, this is from Andy. Thank you for a great synopsis of the India story. Given that 65% of India's population is between 16 and 35 years of age, how specifically is India using and planning to use this demographic dividend, especially around job creation, lest this opportunity get wasted and worsen a demographic disaster?
Thank you, Mandy. A good perspective on the challenges of could be of a positive demographic dividend going the other way. Look, all countries go through this phase. You have these crests and curves in how you've come across demographics. You will be young at one point of time and you will be aging at one point of time if you don't balance this out or plan it properly. Where we see this at this point of time, and thankfully the government of India is committed to a lot of projects through what we call the Indian startup platform, Indian skilling platform, that we want to pool this young population for the benefit of the growth of the economy in the country in areas where the young people relate to presently, given the global dynamics around them. And that's why when I mentioned, we did not have a multimedia or a gaming industry or an entertainment industry or a hospitality industry landscape this wide 10 years back. But these are all tangible: travel, tourism, gaming, multimedia, entertainment, AI, quantum computing, software. These are all avenues that have come up in the last 20 odd years and are in itself billion-dollar industries. So we hope that given the twin combination of the India skilling program and the India startup ecosystem, we would be able to tap into most of our young for the growth of our own country without holding back their desire to go abroad or contribute their capacities to other countries or other skill sets that may attract that talent otherwise. So it's a completely open market. There's no restriction there on talent going outside. We would prefer that it's best used for the benefit of the country. And there are specific programs that cater to harnessing this talent going forward. And I hope we stay the course and stick to the script, because we need to be the third largest economy by 2028. And that's where our demographic dividend will carry us in that direction.
So could you also speak to India's current version of its historical non-alignment strategy and straddling that fine line in the current geopolitical situation?
That's a very good question. I assume it's coming from Tim himself, if not one of the online audience, but whoever it's coming from. Look, India is one of the founding members of the non-alignment movement, along with Egypt, Indonesia, I think Tanzania. There were 5 countries that came together and set up the NAM in 1965. Because in an age of Cold War, there were countries in the global south which did not want or like themselves to be identified with A or B, or being on the side of A or being on the side of B. People felt, especially developing countries felt, that they should have their own strategic autonomy to make decision making for themselves, keeping in mind the primary interests for their own population. That's how the NAM movement came together. But let me be very clear. Non-alignment doesn't mean that you are not aligned with your own national interest. You are aligned with your own priorities. They may not be the priorities of the United States or of Russia or of that point of time, but they have to address the priorities of you yourself as a country going forward. So that's how this group of NAM came together. At this point of time, it is a bloc which is more than 120 countries in the United Nations together, looking largely at challenges that the global south faces when it comes to addressing developing country perspectives. For example, even in the age of the COVID pandemic, a large number of countries were left to fend for themselves. And again, if you look at the landscape of the Pacific small island developing countries, Togo, Tuvalu, Nauru, in Africa, smaller countries like Lesotho, or on the Western Africa front, getting vaccines was a real challenge for themselves, because production was only at 1 or 2 places and countries were left. And by that time, please remember, this was also when the Ukraine conflict was raging on, which impacted prices of fuel and fertilizers in the global south. So it compounded their problems. And that's where I come to the part of the question where I say, how does India navigate its space? Look, we used our own vaccine to make sure that it reached countries in the global south, in spite of us facing the challenge ourselves, because countries were looking up to us than just a Chinese option or an option being produced in the Western world. So I'm happy to inform you that in the age of COVID, we were able to deliver vaccines to 134 countries, mostly in the global south, that were manufactured in India itself. Now, is India just an NAM country? Doesn't it see its interests meeting with other blocs? We are also a member of the Quad. We are also a member of the BRICS. Quad is India, US, Australia, and Japan. And even in that framework, we developed resilient supply chains to make sure that, say, a portion of the funding came from the US, a portion of the technology came from Japan, production of the vaccine happened in India, delivery was done by Australia to a country called Samoa. This has also happened. So the Quad has also worked together and contributed in addressing the health crisis. So wherever we see global good happening and being able to contribute, India does play its part, irrespective of the platform we find ourselves. But at the end of the day, it is about our own strategic autonomy and how our national interests are best served. Sorry for that long answer.
Okay, so back to me. I'm so curious. You mentioned the democracy in India, which is great. And that got me wondering about servants and people in the lower caste. Are they able to vote as well?
So anybody who is a citizen of India is above 18 years of age, irrespective of his social caste, age, creed, profile, tribe, ethnicity, is expected to vote. The thing of being able to vote is you should have the means to reach the polling station and the desire to cast a vote. And that's what I said. Out of the 990 million people, in the last election, we had 668 million turning up to vote. And the plus part is the percentage of people turning out to vote in villages, in tribal areas, was way higher than urban centers. So when you are really talking about people who may be seemed as socially backward or towards the weaker end of the spectrum, in the India democratic story, their desire to turn up and make their vote count is more significant, statistically speaking, evidence-based, than what we see. It's very difficult to pull out young people in the metros or well-off people to come under hot blazing sun and cast a vote. But it is not that difficult in a village or in a tier 2 or in a tier 3 city in India. But yes, all of them do get to cast the vote, and depending on whether they want to do it or not.
So, Consul General, when you and I met several months ago, when you were down here, I think you and I spoke about civic engagement and voter turnout and democracy. And it's so fascinating to me because at WorldOregon, we have brought for, decades, many people to the US to look at democratization and sort of best practices and being able to import things back to their own countries. But with extreme humility, I look at the democratic story of India, and I am always astounded at the voter turnout. And I'm wondering, I think I joked at the time, maybe we should have some reverse exchanges and send our elected leaders over to India to learn about voter engagement. But how do you incentivize? I know you were talking about the power of people being able to have their vote count and their voice heard. But are there incentives that India uses to guarantee a broad accessibility to the ballot?
Thanks, Tim. I would really say that the Indian democratic or the Indian experience in conducting elections is a brilliant case study for democracies around the world of how transparent and how accessible we have made our elections. I think coming to the incentivization part of it, we do make sure that irrespective of where you are, there is a polling booth available within a 2-kilometer radius of where you are for a country of the size of India. And I can tell you a very interesting example. We have a tribe in Gujarat state, near the Run of Kutch area. It's a very, what did we call it? It's a marshy land where there is a Siddhi tribe where only 7 people live as part of that tribe over the last several decades. Our polling booth officials have to drive, walk, and navigate this marshy land for 200 kilometers to reach that space. But they still go every 5 years to set up the booth there so that one of these 7 people can come up and cast the vote in that area where this tribe lives. 7 people. We have 12 people go to make sure that the booth is set up there and the option available. So when you talk about incentivization, a primary key is accessibility and availability to the remotest possible place. That I think is a very significant plus in the Indian democratic story. In the northeast of India, in forests of India, we make sure that we are there to give them the choice. Second part is incentivizing. In incentivizing is how do you make sure that people are aware and feel, look, how can you incentivize only when you feel that your vote contributes to change, meaningful change, is when you will be able to do what is expected in a thriving democracy. And I would say the Nota example that I gave you, our election provides you the option to reject all candidates on the table. The fact that we had 184,000 people in one city lining up to press the Nota button, because earlier, again, I'm telling you, 10 years back when we introduced the button, people said, who will go out and waste their time to say, sorry, I don't like anybody. But 10 years later, we have 184,000 people lining up to express their choice to say, no, sorry, I don't like anybody. Come again, give me better choices. So we have worked at ways and means to incentivize it. We have, again, there are people who are illiterate, but still come up and turn to press the button and exercise the option to vote. So it's been a combination of options that have helped incentivize the voter come to the voting booth. And I would say the Indian Election Commission has been greatly successful in popularizing this throughout the length and breadth of India.
I know in recent history, you've had some thorny relations with China. I'd be curious what your comments are about where do you think India's relationship with China is going now?
Thank you for that question. I have myself served in China for about 9 years, 3 postings, early 2002 to 2006, 2009, and then again in 2015 and 17. It's our neighbor. It's one of the world's largest economies. There was a time when the economic partnership between India and China was looking up. It went through a difficult phase in the last 4 to 5 years because of an incident we had at our border. And post that, I would say the relationship or the engagement in the economic space did come down significantly because our leadership was very clear that for the relationship to improve or go up, it's important to maintain peace and tranquility on the border, which was being honored earlier, 30 years ago, but had this unfortunate incident at our border, and that adversely impacted the relationship. But since then, we have had significant round of dialogues with the Chinese leadership to address the situation at the border, and we are making gradual headway on that in a positive direction. So let's see how that goes. It would be too early for me to comment from where I am placed to give a bigger picture on that one. But I do know for a fact that there have been some recent developments that indicate positive movement forward.
So you mentioned the Quad a little bit ago, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Quad and with a sort of a redirect in terms of U.S. policy and the freezing of foreign aid. What are the members of the Quad feeling, and how do you think that's going to affect the dynamics in the Indo-Pacific?
The Quad moving itself from just being a concept to what it's now actually doing on ground is a journey, I would say, since 2006-9, at least from the Japanese times. There was President Abe, Premier Abe. So it's gone through its own evolution phase, where it's now find itself as a very strong and powerful mechanism of global good, where 3 countries actually are from the developed world: Japan, Australia, and the United States. India is still from the developing world, placed in a unique corner of South Asia, but still all 4 countries working together, trying to bring to the table their best card of what could be a solution in a third geography setting. So again, Quad has various working groups. Quad works together on climate change. Quad works together in the healthcare space. Quad works together in the defense space. Quad works a lot on doing projects to do with resilience, climate change in the Indo-Pacific, and projects to do with connectivity in the Indian Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific. So Indo-Pacific is going to be the key priority area for the Quad working together, making sure that the collective benefit of our mutual synergies of the four countries is best brought to play for global good. And it's really going to be a very important plurilateral or a minilateral grouping, as you may call it, going forward across the entire global landscape. And I again see bipartisan support from the US administration for Quad going forward.
Great. So we are at time. I want to ask our audience to join me in a big round of applause for the Consul General.
Thank you so much, Tim, for doing this. Today, as I said, is the festival of Holi. Otherwise, I would have been there coloring all of you with Indian colors. But whenever I am there next time around, I do look forward to meeting in person and conveying my greetings there. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm sure they will join me in wholeheartedly welcoming you back here in person for a lovely conversation and a good meal. Thank you so much. And to our audience in the room, I want to remind you, Bridge Together, April 30th. Be there, be square. Also, your souvenir for the entire series. Can't tell the players without a program. $10 for you today. Great Decisions books right over here. I want to thank our dear friends at the PSU campus AV who have been here in and out, year in and year out, helping us do things like talking to people from long distances away. Consul General, my deepest thanks, and to your staff. They're wonderful to work with. We will see you soon, and we will see all of you soon.
Thank you. The meal is on me. We'll host an Indian meal for your entire WorldOregon team, but I'm there next time. Thank you. All the best.
Sure. So let's just break this down a little bit. So the thing that happened right at the very beginning of the meeting was me. I had the wrong fader on my thing. Just simply, so that one's canceled out. That was just that mistake. So, but what we're trying to do, simply put, and there probably would be decent reason to have one extra unit here, but what we're trying to, all we're trying to do is just bring in one, and we want to have a post fade in this situation. So if that microphone is on over there and I've got it down in the room, he's not picking it up on in the room. If we have pre-fade, then if these are down in the room, then he's hearing. Okay.
That's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's cool. That's cool. And then but then, and so this has actually been called, I've heard this called a mix minus. Have you ever heard that term?
Yep.
Okay, so that would mean we're gonna send this mix minus this one.
Okay. Gotcha.
To a
Mix minus.
So you go, you would say mix minus.
Yeah.
That thing. So you would send them all and do it in there.
Sweet.
And but that's all that was happening there. And so but
The
yeah.
fade got me confused because when
Yep.
I had my headphones on and I was like, why am I hearing us despite all of us being muted?
Okay, so
was
that's what
those
you were hearing.
microphones.
I'm trying to figure out what you were hearing the problem, because obviously you were going through something that I wasn't picking up on.
No, it was
You were going through some.
it was the fade
Okay,
for sure because I think it was picking up the mic here that was on, even though the fade was down.
So I started out going, oh shit, we're in pre-fade. I don't want to get to this thing from pre to post. Yeah. So I was keeping track of mics that were on, and luckily Tim was doing a really good job of just turning off his mic.
Yeah.
So that was working out. But then I decided that I could make the switch. And the reason I decided that I could make the switch is that I was working with a perfect unity here, perfect unities here, and I was rocking straight up to unity on this. So I thought, okay, that means if I go from pre to post,
It won't change
it
anything.
won't change. And I just the slightest little something in his voice when he was talking, and it might have been imagination, right?
Yeah. Placebo.
Placebo effect, right? But so that's when I switched it back to post at that point.
Yeah.
So if you're sending it just to a videographer, right? So a lot of times, in fact, I used to work with Nate, he would have a little 4-channel Shure up at his camera.
Yeah.
So I would send him one and he would be working with those. So he just wanted complete free fade, give me everything, I'll decide what goes into the camera.
Yeah.
Right? And that's usually what
That makes sense.
audio or a videographer is one.
Yes.
So, but yeah, and so the only difference between what I do and what I thought about, we did this again, it might be nice just spatially. So when I do this in faculty senate, I work with that podium. So what's different there is I have a podium right there. I take one of those laptops, I just stick it down there. The only thing it's doing is bringing in audio to it.
Gotcha.
Right. So then at the podium, I'm watching the video.
Yeah.
Then I've got my camera going through all this stuff right here. So, but yeah, it just starts, it starts spinning around in there. And next thing you know, you're freaking out.
Yeah. Happens pretty rapidly.
It sure does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just put pressure